Well, hello and good evening, and welcome to the Caithness Amateur Dram Antiques Society tasting. Tonight I'm going to be doing a tasting from a distillery that's local to Caithness. Last Thursday, my wife and I used our bus pass and travelled through to Wick, and we had booked a tour of Pulteney Distillery. Because we got there rather early and it was raining, we decided to go to the distillery to see if we could get a cup of coffee. They don't have a cafe. They do have a shop and they have a visitor centre. So they guided us down to the Pulteney Town People's Project, which is just about 50 yards down the road. It's a lovely building, and you get a nice coffee and a possibility of a cake. And the suggested donation for coffee from the kettle you make yourself with a bit of cake, this time it was carrot cake, was £1. There is a coffee machine that you can make coffee from. I think that's a bit more expensive. But you get a nice seat, comfortable table, comfortable seat, and out the big windows you can see a rather historic building called Barrigal Hall, which used to hold exhibitions, meetings, and latterly was used as an auction hall, but it's rather sadly all boarded up and looks in rather a state of neglect. But we wandered back up to the distillery and picked up the tour then at 11:30. We'd booked a tour that was about 2 hours. You got a tour of the distillery, followed by a tasting of four whiskies, the 12, the 15, the 18, and the Huddart. And we were rather expertly guided by our guide Ricky, and he was a mine of information and a very pleasant man as well. The one thing he told us was that the Pulteney or Old Pulteney is known as the maritime malt, and I'd always considered that because of its coastal elements and a perception from me that it was a slightly salty taste, rather like Talisker, although of course Pulteney is unpeated. But in fact, his thoughts are that the maritime malt came from the fact that back in the 1850s, the herring fleet would be working its way round the coast, and when it hit Wick, the distillery workers would go off to work on the herring boats and follow them down to Lowestoft. And they'd be gone from about June to October. And so his thoughts were that this was where the maritime element of the maritime malt came from. So Pulteney Distillery, for a long time, Pulteney could be called the most northern distillery on the Scottish mainland. In, but when Wolfburn Distillery in Thurso opened in 2013, they took over the title. But Pulteney hasn't lost its attraction on whisky lovers. The coastal style of the Old Pulteney whisky, uh, as the whiskies from Pulteney Distillery are called, is a unique one, and the releases are very well judged by whisky connoisseurs and experts. The distillery was founded in 1826 by James Henderson, and the Pulteney Distillery was named after Sir William Pulteney. The part of Wick that the distillery is situated into at that time was a separate little town called Pulteney Town. The barley at that time was transported to Wick by ship, and that was the way the whisky barrels left it. Herring fishing was booming, and people got to know Wick as the town of silver and gold, herring and whisky. James Watson bought Pulteney in 1920 until Buchanan Dewar took over. Wick then became a dry town, and whisky producing was not very popular during that time. Remember the Pattison crash. 2 years later, they sold it to Distillers Company Ltd, who closed it in 1930. There was a prohibition in Wick at that time, and the distillery remained inactive for about 20 years until Robert Cumming brought it back to life in 1951. Hiram Walker took over in 1955 and started renovations and expansions the following years. At that time, Pulteney produced mainly for blends such as Ballantine's, and through this, it survived the whisky crisis in the 1980s. In 1995, the distillery was bought by Inverhouse Distillers, who are still the owner and have made Old Pulteney one of the most famous single malts of the Highlands. In 2001, when Inverhouse was bought by Pacific Spirits for $85 million, the ownership of Pulteney changed again. Pacific Spirits continued to expand the quantity of Pulteney bottlings. In 2004, an official 17-year-old bottling was released, followed by a 21-year-old in 2005. In 2006, international beverage holders who still own the distillery bought Pacific Spirits. Under IBH, the range of official releases from the distillery has developed into a truly impressive range that will hopefully continue to expand in future years. Production as well as maturation of Old Pulteney whisky, they have about 25,000 barrels on site, and it takes place in the heart of Wick, in Huddart Street, and just a few other distilleries in Scotland, for example, Oban and Glengarry, the Pulteney distillery is not situated in the outer region of the town, but embedded in a close neighbourhood of other business buildings and shops. As Pulteney is not a very big distillery, the handcrafted production is nice to watch. And we did see this. We saw the man doing the mash tun, and then he was ripping open the bags of yeast ready to go in. They use dried yeast, which is vacuum packed. Production capacity of Pulteney is about 1.8 million litres per annum, but they're producing now about 1.2 million litres per annum. 60% of which they keep for bottling, and 40% goes to the blenders. They don't do their own malting, but that they get back from Baird's Maltings in Inverness. The malt is ground into grist in the old Porteous mill, which is a lovely burgundy colour, with its 4 rollers, which is almost 90 years old. That's then mashed in the semi-lauter mash tun made of stainless steel with a copper canopy. It can take 5 tons of malt per mash, and there are 19 mashes per week. They have they run 24/7 from Sunday night at 10 o'clock until Friday night at 10 o'clock, and they work in shifts. There's 2 on each shift. They work from 6 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, 2 in the afternoon till 10 at night, and then 10 at night until 6 in the morning. And every 6 months, the distillery workers put their name in a hat, and they draw them out, and they are then paired with a different person usually. It could take 5 tons of malt per mash, and there are 19 mashes per week. The draft left over from mashing is mixed with the pot ale uh, and sold as cattle food to local farmers. In fact, you can see the big blue trailer following a truck around, being towed by a truck around the back roads of Caithness as it goes around the farms. The mash tun was replaced in 2014. Previously, Pulteney worked with an old cast iron mash tun that was open at the top and slowly leaking. For reasons of efficiency, it was replaced by a new one with a copper lid. The interesting thing about Pulteney is that instead of the usual 3 mashings, there are 4. The water from the last 2 processes is stored temporarily and reused with the next batch in the first 2 mashing processes. In this way, the mash at Pulteney really gets the maximum sugar and starch from the grist. There was a bucket of new make spirit in the filling room, and the tour guide let us dip our finger in it and have a taste, and it was lovely and fruity. For fermentation, in 6 washbacks with a capacity of 23,000 litres, fermentation takes place. 5 of the washbacks are made of Corten steel and 1 of stainless steel. It was planned to replace them all by stainless steel ones, and I think they have done that recently. Fermentation lasts 60 hours. Pulteney uses dried yeast, start and lead fermentation. And there's also a special approach to fermentation at Pulteney. The yeast enters the washbacks at the same time as the mash, which means it's distributed much more quickly and can react more rapidly with the sugars. The pot stills of Pulteney look unique because they have massive bulbs. There's 1 spirit still and 1 wash still standing next to each other. The top of the wash still is flat, and they tell you that they had to cut it because when they ordered it, they hadn't realised the correct height of the roof. And the shape of the bottles, which I'll show you in a minute, refers to the shape of the stills. The pot stills have large reflux bowls, which I think the guide explained to us, if I remember rightly. They made the large reflux bowls with the copper that they had to cut off from the top of the stills. So there's a lot of copper contact during distillation, which leads to the expectation of a milder new make spirit. And I can confirm that what I tasted was very mild and fruity. The special thing about the wash still is that it's heated very strongly for rapid distillation. At the end of the first distillation, the spirit has an alcohol content of 30 to 35% by volume, which is relatively high. The spirit still can thus distill more slowly, which would also speak for a milder spirit. So the less mild and rather spicy character of the Pulteney spirit is due to the worm tubs, which are used for cooling. They are located outside the still house and are cooled with water from the river. Worm tubs usually produce more spicy flavours, so the spirit for the old Pulteney malts tend to be heavier and spicier. When I said river, I actually meant the Lade that comes from Hemprig's Loch, which is about 3 miles away. The ex-bourbon cask as well as ex-sherry cask give home to the spirit that has matured to become Pulteney single cask. I think the guide told us that nowadays it's about 98% ex-bourbon and 2% ex-sherry. Although maybe a few years ago it was about 10% ex-sherry. Pulteney has a total of 5 warehouses, 2 rack warehouses with large shelves and 3 low dunnage warehouses with clay floors. One of them used to be a cask making facility with mainly herring casks being made there. So while the distillery is called Pulteney Distillery, Whiskey that's produced at Pulteney is old Pulteney whiskey, and it's very fruity and typically shows aromas of apples, mandarins, and raisins. And very typical of Pulteney is its dry and a slightly salty character, which I think is one of the reasons also that it's called the Maritime Malt. And the other one is the distillery is situated in the centre of Wick, and that once was the herring capital of the whole of Europe. So could a whiskey have a more maritime origin than that? When in 2011, Jim Murray named the Old Pulteney 21 years old the Whiskey of the Year, the distillery got an, a new public focus and saw an increased demand for its products. The new Lighthouse edition was released and presented, uh, which was matured in different casks. North Head matured in ex-bourbon, Pentland Skerries, Duncansby Head, and so nowadays they have the 12, the 15, the 18, and the Huddart. And I think they've just produced a new one called Harbour. When you do the tour, you get a nice Glencairn to take home with you, uh, with the distillery emblem and name on it. Established in 1826. So first up, we're going to try the Old Pulteney 12-year-old, and for this one, I'm going to open a bottle, but it's a rather older bottle. If you see Ralphie reviewing Old Pulteney, he does not like the new packaging, which is a cardboard box. This is a rather more substantial cardboard packaging with aluminium top and bottom. And nowhere on the bottle does it say uncoloured or non-chill filtered, so we probably have to assume that this one is. Although I think the rest are certainly non-chill filtered. So yeah, now they have a less substantial cardboard box. Excuse me just a minute. Not good for the teeth, but never mind. And this is the bottle, of course. You can see that the bottle is done in the style of the pot still. So let's see what we have here. So this one's bottled at 40%, and it's matured in hand-selected ex-bourbon casks. And it's a light gold colour. It has medium viscosity, I would say. Let's see where the nose is in this. And you get honeycomb, vanilla, tablet. There's a soft sawdust oakiness and oat cakes. Sweet vanilla, and you get the grits and butter. A sort of stale cream crackers and lemon rind. It's sweet and juicy oranges, light vanilla, a little ginger, and you do get a sea breeze resonating in the background, which is refreshingly tingling. A little lime and some caramel notes, cereals and lemon cake. I'm going to try this on the mouth. And you get chocolate peanuts, mint, citrus peels, and some maritime elements. And white pepper, vanilla, and sweet honey. There are some floral hints and tropical fruit in the background. But overall, the flavour is a bit muted. You get orange marmalade, caramel, some sparkling oak, lemon balm, lemongrass. The barley levels off, and now I'm getting a bit of Red Bull cola, slightly salty with a hint of marzipan. But you know, I can't escape the 40% ABV. It's very thin, and it's a bit like fruit cocktail syrup that's been significantly watered down. With peace and love to Pulteney Distillery, just don't enjoy this. It's an overly neutered, unnatural whiskey. And on the finish, I get toffee, brine, and lemon, some toasted oak, honey, vanilla, and it's slightly bitter. I'm going to try maybe 4 drops of water in this. I'm not getting any Scotch mist there. Yeah, with water, I get a little smoky touch. And now I get a definite sea air brininess and a nice leathery smell. Briny, and then it quickly goes into sweet floral perfume with hints of fresh grass. Try them out. It has a very nice, spicy honey flavour. Slightly dry with a nice, lingering, warming feeling. Sweet, salty, and citrus arrival. And a nice development in citrus of oranges and hints of lime with a vanilla sweetness. And you know, the finish is relatively short. It's very soft. Cocoa, a delicate toasted aroma, nutmeg, pinch of salt, grapefruit, a hint of licorice, but everything fades very quickly. It's a nice tongue coating and soft finish of sour and sweetness. You know, this whiskey, this bottle has nostalgia, but no depth. It's a light, bland, and unchallenging single malt that doesn't impress. I remember old Pulteney 12-year-old pre 2018, and I recall that with fondness. It's a bit of a shame. Right, I'm going to cleanse my palate with the Walker's Minioke. Now we're going to try the old Pulteney 15-year-old, which is matured in second fill American oak and ex-bourbon casks, and then further matured in first fill Spanish oak ex-Oloroso sherry butts. It's been finished in sherry rather than created as a marriage of individual matured casks. And I think this one is 13 years in ex-bourbon and 2 years in ex-Oloroso, so 13 and 2, I think. And it's bottled at 46%, non-chill filtered, and it's a nice dark colour. And it's got lovely tears on it as well. So on the nose, I'm getting toffee, coffee, and sultanas. There's a balanced sweetness of toffee and sea spray salinity. It's a very sweet smelling whiskey. And there's some fruity hints to it with only a slight hint of salinity. It's relatively fresh and crisp with apple tarts, dried oranges, and an assortment of confectionery and burnt pan sugars. And you get the vanilla cream and malt loaf, sitting with a scattering of raisins, sultanas, and you get the dry, nutty Oloroso. And in the background, you get the musty dunnage and the furniture polish, and a reassuring lick of salinity. I'm going to try the mouth. And now I get salted caramel and a green apple sharpness, and sea salt and straw. And it's a very strong taste with spices when it hits your tongue. But there's a lingering sweetness to it, almost a dark chocolate and toffee hint, bright, coastal, and with a stronger wood influence. Sherry is up first, demi-sweet with chocolate orange, toffee sauce, and dried nuts. gummy sweets, Haribo, jelly babies, which provide some zing and sit with a growing spice intensity. And then pepper and ginger effervescing from the front to the back of the mouth. And the finish is chocolate with red chili and a hint of spiced rum warmth. It's medium in length and combines creaminess with bitterness. Latte coffee alongside steeped drying tea. Now, I'm going to add some water, but I do suggest being careful here because reduction can drown this quite easily. So I'm going to put 4 drops in. And I do get a wee bit of a Scotch mist there. So with water, and water primarily highlights the cask, the sappy oak, and adds some underlying oatiness. Coffee beans and a smear of waxy grease. It's a relatively fresh note. I get some flower meadow and a fresh breeze, an orange blossom honey, and a malty sweetness. Vanilla semolina pudding, and yellow apple and pear peel. Shortbread, and then back to that tree sap. We'll try them out. And again, with just the right amount of water, it allies the cask in spicing and presents a more explicit sherry-driven berry fruit combination, which works rather nicely. It's initially mild and tidy, sweet, sugar candy, peach iced tea, a roll with butter and quince jelly, but then you get some oak spice. Which tingles a bit. It reminds me a little bit of orange rind. And it's a medium finish. And the fruitiness slowly turns into the spiciness of the oak. So, what did I think of the 15-year-old? It hits you right away with the spiciness. As the distillery states, this is a good balance of the spicy and the sweet. The spices hit you hard, but then the sweetness lingers on your tongue. It's a unique flavoured whiskey. It's rather tasty, which marries fresh and crisp aromas and flavours with just enough sherry and just enough coastal elements. It's a contemporary composition designed for a modern generation of whiskey drinkers. Solid, but I have to say it's a little predictable. Wood forward, but yes, despite the heavy-handed marketing blurb, it is indeed balanced. So, I'm going to cleanse my palate. So, this is the Old Pulteney 18-year-old, bottled at 46%, and was released as part of a fleet of new expressions by Old Pulteney in mid-2018. And it's drawn from a combination of bourbon and Spanish oak casks. So it was aged in second fill bourbon barrels and first fill Oloroso casks. It used to be 15 and 3, so 15 in the bourbon, 3 in the Oloroso, but I think it's now 14 and 4. 14 in ex-bourbon and 4 in the Oloroso. So let's see where we go with this. So it's a darker colour again, longer in the Oloroso, 3 years older. Nice tears on it. So let's see what the nose is like in this. And it's quite intense and warming. You get indulgent chocolate and creamy vanilla with a rich honey sweetness, tempered by vibrant spices. And there's a whisper of flowery fruitiness with citrus and apple. And you get spice, cinnamon spice cookie dough, mature oak, and a very light touch of charcoal. And then you get the dried fruit, raisin and fig and that chocolate, creamy toffee, sweet honey and vanilla, baking spices, cereal malt, and a sprinkle of smoked sea salt. Terry's dark chocolate orange. And there's a nice hint of chocolate and vanilla. It's intense, sweet, with clear notes of sherry, vanilla, honey, milk chocolate, prunes, lots of ripe fruit. There's a light varnish there and spices. We'll try them out. And it's a chocolate indulgence, layered with honeyed spices and Christmas cake. There's floral notes which lend it a dash of finesse, and zesty hints of citrus and green apple. enliven a lovely long tasting element to this. Dark chocolate and green apple make for a great juxtaposition of bitterness and sweetness. And in the background, there's waves of vanilla and rye bread. It's succulent red berry fruits, grapes and dried raisins, creamy milk and dark chocolate, and vanilla, and it's floury and dusty like cocoa powder, spiced cinnamon, nutmeg, and black pepper. And you get the fruity malt loaf and the serene and the salted caramel sauce and chocolate lime sweeties. Yes, definitely chocolate lime sweeties. I'm getting that. And it's a very nice flavour of smoky chocolate with an immediate bite of spice and a hint of fruit flavour, almost like dried dates. It's a unique flavour with the added brininess. It's a trademark of Pulteney. Sweet, slightly spicy, milk chocolate, honey, toffee, baked apples, oranges, dried fruit, spices, and a pinch of salt. And the finish is citrus, sea salt, and wet grass. Long, drying, spiced, and dried fruits and dark chocolate. I'm going to try 4 drops of water in this. And there's definitely a little Scotch mist in this. And now I'm getting significant smoke and overripe fruit. And it makes for a somewhat acrid, funky experience. There's sort of notes of walnut shells and roast beef, which give it a distinct savouriness. Let's try them out. And with water, it becomes a bit unbalanced. Your smoky qualities come into the fore, alongside notes of smoked almonds and bitter citrus peel. It's become pungent and salty, which gives the whiskey a lift here. And it's got a sharp and punchy finish. Dark chocolate, dried fruit, a pinch of spices and salt, and a sort of oaky bitterness. Well, this was reminiscent of the discontinued old Pulteney 17-year-old. It has a healthy sherry influence and plenty of nice chocolate notes. Hits you with the spice again right away, just like the 15-year-old. But in the case of the 18-year-old, the chocolate and the unique fruitiness lingers. And once again, you can taste the brininess that the exposure to the salty sea air of Wick brings. It's a curious diversion from the 12 and 15-year-old expressions. But I have to say, I did never find this one overly engaging. So now we're going to try the old coastal, old Pulteney Coastal Series Edition, release number 2 or edition 2, bottled at 46%. It's a limited edition. I don't know how many bottles. Old Pulteney. It's the second expression in the Coastal Series, and it was matured in both the Ruby Port pipes and Ruby Port barriques, which once had the iconic sweet red fortified wine native to the Douro Valley of northern Portugal. So let's see if the sweet flavours of the wine pair well with the briny notes the maritime malt is known for. And it's sort of, you can see there's a ruby hue to this, definitely. This will be interesting. I don't think I've tried an old Pulteney matured in anything other than bourbon or a mix of bourbon and sherry. So nice tears in this. This is a non-age statement. Non-chill filtered, I believe. Don't know what the score is as far as colouring goes, but it has that nice ruby tinge to it. So let's see. It's got nice tears. Let's see what it is. It's got a rich sultana sweetness with vanilla and buttery notes. Sort of candied orange peel with hints of gingerbread and undertones of cherries, marzipan, and dark chocolate, which add depth and balance. Yeah, marzipan, vanilla, orange peel, and sultanas. And there's quite an outburst of fruitiness on the nose. Lots of raisins and sultanas. As a butterscotch vanilla, uh, orange marmalade, and ripe red cherries, ginger, and there's a subtle saltiness, even a sort of subtle salted caramel and some spice in the background. But try them all. And it's sweet and spicy, with notes of baked apples, caramel sugar, and cinnamon swirl pasties, uh, which opens further with vanilla custard, a touch of rose water, and the maritime malt's signature minerality. And the taste continues then into delicate and fruity notes, warm spices, and plum jam sweetness. It's quite sweet, this whiskey. Marmalade, toffee apples, cherries, dark chocolate, and cinnamon. It has a bit of an oily impression, some spice, directly followed by an outburst of sweetness, where the red fruits like cherry and strawberry are prominent. But also you get the raisins and the sultanas, the dried fruits are very much there as well, and sweet orange marmalade. And it evolves into a sense of minerality, where salted caramel is very present, but also a slight hazelnuts, nuttiness, and chocolate. And it's like a sea breeze on the finish, aromatic spice and red berries. It's long, warm, and a little dry, but it's pleasant with a long, lingering touch of spice. And if you're a port lover, you will experience the tannins of the port cask. It's an interesting and complex finish. So I'm going to try 4 drops, being consistent, 4 drops of water in this. And it turns even rosier with the. It's like looking at a rosy wine now. And there's a little Scotch mist there. And it's got a remarkable, almost a fizzy-like quality. Hints of cassis, uh, gingerbread, and orange marmalade, and some baking spices. There's a touch of shortbread too, and finally some damp oak and cloves. I'm going to try them out. And with water, has left a gentle, cloying imprint on the mouthfeel, but it's slightly more recognisable as Old Pulteney with water on the palate. It's a soft salinity, gentle peppery notes too, even some salt. But there's also an intense winey sweetness, juicy red fruits. But they do seem a little out of place. But you also get milk chocolate and hazelnuts. The finish is medium in length, fairly dry. There's some oak spices and a touch of chocolate truffles. So, what I would say about this one is whiskey and port. If you love a good Douro port, then you will love this edition of the Old Pulteney Coastal Series. Because the sea meets the fruitiness and sweetness of the Douro Valley. I was doubting between Ruby and Tony, but ended up in recognising more of the Ruby port. The distillery character is pushed slightly to the side here, which strangely makes it less coastal than, say, the one we found very mild, the Old Pulteney 12-year-old. But I'll tell you what, this is good, and one of the better port cask finished whiskies I've had. So I'm going to cleanse my palate. So, our final whiskey of this tasting is the old Pulteney Huddart, 46%. And Huddart is named after the street on which the distillery stands, which runs up from the harbour at Wick or Pulteney Town and comes right up. It's also at the top of Rutherford Street, which is an interesting street to go up. Lots of scrap metal dealers, there's a bus garage, and an awful lot of dog mess, I must say. However, we don't call it the dark side on this side of the county for no reason. Anyway, so following a finishing period, which in casks which previously held peated whiskey, it's going to be a smoky, because Old Pulteney or Pulteney doesn't peat. So the only way they can get a peaty version is by using casks that previously held peated whiskey. So it's a non-age statement release, composed of refill American oak and ex-bourbon casks that were subjected to a finishing period, which is unspecified, in barrels that previously held peated whiskey from Knock, which of course is Knockdo Distillery, which is part of Inverhouse. So that symbiosis makes perfect sense. The Anknock Peaty range is an ongoing series issued across retail and travel retail, which has a broad selection of ppms, anywhere from 8 up to 40. In 2018, there's core range Peathart expressions. But Huddart's level of peat influence is unknown, though from my tasting notes, I guess it's from either the lower end of the spectrum or that the finishing period was incredibly brief, perhaps even both. The bottle is commonly available and clocks in at £43.80. So 46% ABV, no definite notes about colouring. And the guide, Ricky, I think, suggested this was unchill filtered, and it has nice tears. So let's see. Immediately, what I'd say, it's rich and warming. It's brilliant, actually, with mellow wood smoke, honey, and oily leather, which blooms later into sort of crisp green apple. And I get creamy vanilla and a hint of burnt toffee in the background. And caramel apple, a whiff of bonfire smoke, followed by creamy vanilla. And I get some toffee apples and sharp lemons. And which that provides a base for the maritime forward notes of smooth beach pebbles, limestone, and a sea breezy, salty air can sit. But the promised smoke is faint, frail, and almost a murmur. It's like a doe's beach fire from days long past. But right there, there's honey lockets with a mentholated aspect, a light terribleness of olive oil, and some cured fish, gravidax. The old Pulteney character is certainly present. It's less overtly salty, but still firmly coastal. Given blind, I may even be steering towards a Glen Scotia here. Anyway, let's try them out. The freshly ground spices and the soft vanilla balance the notes of smoke and peat fire. And they're both richly sweet and distinctly salty coastal flavours in the background. Together, they're reminiscent of a sort of salted caramel, burnt sugar, and fried banana, alongside a touch of brine. And now there's a sharp coastalness with shingle, limestone, and a chalky minerality. But a lot less of the quartz saltiness that you find in, say, the 12-year-old. Lemon is up front, slightly sweet, and joined by straightforward ex-bourbon flavours of vanilla toffee and coconut. And these cask constituents also bring spice, touches of pepper and ginger along for the ride. Smoke is nearly imperceptible here. Indeed, to my taste, it's more of a burnt, charred cask heads than there is an outright peat influence. In the background, there's aromas of cut grass and sunflowers, both pleasant and garden fresh. And on the finish, I get lingering thyme honey and earthy salt. It's a medium finish, somewhat creamy with meringue and coconut, and somewhat drying with ex-bourbon wood. And in the dying moments of the finish, a cooling mint freshness. So, for sake of consistency, I'll do 4 drops in this. So it's turned even paler. Nice tears on this. And there is a slight Scotch mist there too. And it reveals an underlying maltiness and cereals. And often when you add water, it does add just a touch more prominence to the peated element. But in this case, Scotch oils. It's still very much on the down low though. We'll try them out. And water opens things up to more sweetness, sugar coated apples, a greater ginger spice, and a more defined oaky back palate. So with water, the finish is apples, malty, prickly, medium length, and medium intensity. So Huddart takes the coastal character of Old Pulteney and transposes it. Outright saltiness is replaced by a more generic coastal quality. It's still certainly maritime, but it's murkier and less chiselled. And that's a shame, as there's a reason that salt is used as a universal flavour improver when it comes to seasoning. Nevertheless, for Huddart, the overall composition works and it's agreeable enough. But my main disappointment with Huddart comes from its peat finish. I've no objections to subtlety, but here the smoke influence is positively ghost-like. In the past, Old Pulteney peat-influenced expressions took precursor casks and sympathetically wove their inherent qualities into the distillery's DNA over time. Huddart feels like an ex-peated cask has been whacked in the general direction of the Old Pulteney spirit for little more than an afternoon. There's something there, but it's understated to such an extent I'd sooner spend time with the explicitly salty and ego character 12-year-old, 15-year-old, 18-year-old, or even best of all, the port matured Coastal Series 2. So, Caithness has now got 3 distilleries producing with another in building process and yet another planned. It's an exciting time to be a whisky lover in the far north. Old Pulteney itself is rather a marmite malt. Its distinctive maritime character makes for a unique experience, rather like in spirit, but not in tasting profile, Talisker. I like an Old Pulteney occasionally just to bring me back down to earth, but I've never been convinced that it has the complexity, balance, or, if I'm being completely honest, the magic that my very favourite single malt whiskies have. Thank you for listening.